Hello, and welcome to Recruiting Hell. I'm glad you're here with us today. I'm your host, Rob Conlon. Episode 14 is here, and we have our biggest guest to date. We'll be talking about something that bothers both job seekers and folks who are new to the job alike. It's called Imposter Syndrome. And if you've never heard of Imposter Syndrome, it's something that can really take the wind out of your sails when it comes to job hunting, as well as improving your own prospects for better employment. Now, everyone experiences imposter syndrome, and we can get some great insight on this from one of my favorite people today, who has not only made his own thing, like we talked about with Chris Zahn in episode 10, but he's running it into somewhat uncharted territory. And as he grows in this role and creates the project to his liking and vision, we're going to learn a little bit about that from him today and how he faces down imposter syndrome. But before we get to our guest today and introduce him, we're going to set the stage, as we normally do, with a reminder and a welcome for those who are just tuning in to Recruiting Hell for the first time and may have some questions about this whole operation. So, what is Recruiting Hell? Recruiting Hell is a term that I used to describe the frustration of job hunting in 2020. If you head to any major job site or employer, there are endless opportunities, but it's gotten more and more difficult to land those jobs for the average person. The whole goal of this show is to give you the tools to help you find a job that brings you both fulfillment and self-worth. Now, not everyone defines their self-worth on their job, but here in American culture, we place a heavy value on being a contributing member of society. And of course, not hating what you do every day to pay the bills is a massive benefit to anyone. The whole goal of this show is to help you navigate through recruiting hell by avoiding the scam jobs, the bad employers, the too much work for too little pay, and the mental stress of being jobless or in a position that you hate. We're here to help you keep your chin up after your 200th application with no response, your 50th rejection email this month, or a great opportunity ghosting you. In a nutshell, this show is about helping people. And if we can help just one other person out there land a new position and get them out of recruiting hell, that's a win for them, a win for me, and a win for our society as a whole. So now that we've, of course, discussed the purpose of the show, let's shift to the topic at hand, imposter syndrome. This mental roadblock, if you will, is often characterized by a frequent and chronic self-doubt in one's abilities and skills. It's that really negative voice in your head that constantly says, "You're not good enough. You can't do this. You'll never make it." Now, our guest today is someone I selected to bring on this show, not only because he helped me conquer some of my own imposter syndrome challenges with this show and other things, but he's someone who facilitates others to be the best version of themselves when tackling new projects. So it is my pleasure to invite on Elzie Flenard III, the mayor of PodcastTown, to our show today. Elzie, welcome to the show. It is wonderful to have you on, and I will say it is a shame on me for not having you here sooner, good sir. Welcome.
Thank you so much. And I will also add a little bit of shame to you as well for taking so long to invite me on. But I'm so glad to be here.
Well, definitely, Elzie. Again, it is just great to have you. And again, the whole story here, the journey between yourself and myself here, I think is really a neat thing. And I'll set the stage and kind of jump in this a little bit here first, and then I'll let you take over. You and I didn't know each other a very short amount of time ago. And actually, when we were talking about the beginnings of this little script here, you said it's 2 months, not 4. So 2 months ago, this relationship didn't happen. I didn't have a show. I was facing some really crazy challenges and tough things on what to do with the concept that I had to help people find better jobs. And then you reached out to me on LinkedIn with this new concept of yours called PodcastTown. And me being somebody who was starting a show, I thought this was sort of interesting and really timely. So I signed up and became a founding member. If we fast forward the 2 months to today, we've got a great business relationship, you and I, that I didn't think we would ever have a chance of pulling out of that little LinkedIn invite and signing up for a website that I didn't know much about. So, Elzie, to give people an idea of where you're coming from and where your advice matters when it comes to talking about imposter syndrome and sort of the things that surround it, why don't you give us the Elzie Flenard story from whenever you kind of want to start that up until bringing us to today?
Got it. How much time do you have, Rob?
Well, we can chop this into a number of episodes if you want.
Got it. So the short version is I grew up in one of the smaller towns in southern Illinois. Mm-hmm. We zero stoplights, zero. There was one gas station, one grocery store. Everybody knew everybody. So just a quintessential small town America. And when you talk about imposter syndrome, I didn't think that I was smart enough to go to college, right? I didn't think that I could afford to go to college. So in high school, my plan was I was just going to join the military because I thought that that's what poor kids who weren't smart enough and couldn't afford college, that's what they did. They just went to the military. Not to say that there's anything bad about the military, but that was my perception and my mindset.
Well, sure. There's nothing a mistake about that. For a lot of folks, that is upward mobility. That's for sure. Mm-hmm. And
yep.
So continue, please.
Yep. And so, but I had people in my life, and I'll never forget it. I was having a conversation with my sister, and she said, Elzie, I respect your decision, to join the military, because she had done that before. And my two older sisters, both of them went that route. But she said, well, Elzie, I think you can do something different. Not to say that the military is bad, but I think you could go to college. I think you could take that route. And it was her, my mom, and the people around me that really encouraged me and planted that seed that I could do it. And so I'm listening to this encouragement, and I go to my recruiter at the time, and I say, I think I'm going to take a different route. Because we had been in conversations. This is junior, senior year.
Go to the recruiter and said, no.
Yeah, and I said, I think I want to go a different route. I want to go to college and do that. And I never forget it. He looked me right in the face and he said, you can't afford it. You'll never do it. And that was the moment in my life where it went from this kid who wasn't smart enough, couldn't afford it, to not only am I going to go, but I'm going to go to the college of my choice, and I'm going to kill it. For you guys who don't know what that means I'm going to get good grades, and I'm going to graduate with honors. And so that was that point in my life, again, where my mindset shifted. And I started to really see myself, not in an arrogant way, but realizing the power that I had when my mindset matched my actions. And the rest is history. Went to tech school for 2 years, graduated there, decided to get a bachelor's degree, did that. And then sometime later went and got my MBA. So I showed him. So
good.
That is kind of, again, that pivotal moment in my life that I draw from. Even when I was launching PodcastTown, it's like, why would anybody want to join a group that has me at the helm and to teach them anything? That thought creeps in. But then I hear the voices of my sister and of my mom and all the people who supported me saying, no, Elzie, you can do this. You have something to offer. So it's kind of a mix between having the humility, but understanding the power you possess.
That is like the best win story I've ever heard, especially teaching the recruiter. I got my MBA now, jerk. That's fabulous, man. So now we've got a little background kind of where you came from, and I'm sure when that recruiter talked to you, that probably, it probably really hurt when he said, you can't, you're not going to make it. And then you did. And that's the neatest thing. He put that kind of imposter syndrome maybe in you, and you conquered that, which is outstanding. So what on earth made you want to start a community that, was kind of based on podcasting, combine this kind of with the next question too, and do this job versus working for someone else?
Yeah. So here's the truth, Rob. I'm giving you the truth here. I've always wanted to own my own business. Like ever since I was a little boy, I was the kid who would draft out the playoff brackets, give the teams names, and play I was that kid that would create board games, play them with myself, try to get my, siblings to play with me. I was that kid who, would tear apart my Casio keyboard and try to get the parts to work. So I was that guy. But
Sounds expensive.
But I was also the kid who had a decent head on his shoulders. I understood very early that I wanted to have a family, and didn't work out so well for me. My mom and dad divorced when I was about 6 years old, so I didn't have that element to my family life, and I always wanted that. But I realized that if I was going to get a decent mate, I should probably have a job so that I could feed the family that I wanted to grow. So my plan was, okay, I'll go to college because, again, I was going to show that recruiter that not only can I do it, but I'm going to do it well. So my plan was I was going to go to college, I was going to get a decent job, and then I was going to build my business on the side and then transition from working for somebody else to working for myself. And I'm happy to announce that here we are. So the plan worked. It took a little bit longer than I anticipated, but in essence, the plan worked. So I've always wanted to own my own business. I've always been that guy who had vision and wanted to couple that with the practical aspect of it. A lot of people, quote unquote, want to start their own business, but they don't really want to start their own business. It's a really cool thing to say, but a lot of people don't understand what it takes. And so I've always wanted to own my own business. It was just really, for me, a matter of time.
Gotcha. And actually, I'm really glad that you mentioned that because, we've had an episode here on go do your own thing. And I think what you just said almost tempers that a little bit when it comes to go do your own thing, but be aware that it takes a ton of work and that you're going to, number one, feel stress in a way that you've probably never felt before, not just from the I can't do this, but also, the imposter syndrome side, but also the societal economic pressures of owning a business in the modern age. Mm-hmm. Interesting. Very interesting. So moving a bit further into this and kind of digging into the main topic here of imposter syndrome. So if people were part of a community like PodcastTown, which I am a member, the show is a resident episode, and I love being a part of this, they'd likely find a ton of coaching from you about their shows and their path forward. Elzie, where did you get this? Where did you get this ability to push people to kind of fight that imposter syndrome voice, if you will? Where did that come from in your past?
Yeah, that's a really great question, Rob. I think for me, I've always been a leader. I was a point guard in high school basketball. I've always been the type of person who wanted to pull, push, and get the best out of people. And one day I'm sitting at my whiteboard and I'm thinking through Enterprise Now. What are the next steps? What do I want to do? How can I add value? And I really wanted to launch a coaching program. Mm-hmm. And so I was talking with my coach. I was telling him all the intricacies of what I wanted to do, and the name PodcastTown comes up. So initially, it was just going to be the name of a coaching program, and that was it. We were going to meet 4 times a month, and that was going to be it. Keep it simple, my coach told me. But of course, as an entrepreneur, I did not keep it simple, and it ended up pivoting my entire business to being what it is today. But to answer your question, I genuinely want people to win. And when I say win, I want them to be the best version of themselves, whether that's their podcast, whether it's their business, in every form. And so PodcastTown for me is the expression of that vision, is the expression of that mission to share the things that I've learned over the years, and to prevent people from falling into the same potholes that I fell into. Additionally, the podcast genre and it is grown so much in a good way, but it's a lot more competitive. And so I feel like I am the underdog, in life, in a lot of ways. So I'm always rooting for the underdog. And right now, indie podcasters are the underdog. We're not the Joe Rogans of the world. So we have to be very strategic about content. We have to be focused